Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all of my best bets for this upcoming weekend. Definitely didn't quite go, or definitely didn't start the way that I wanted to with me having the over in last night's game, but hopefully it goes a little bit cleaner throughout the rest of the week. But let's get into all the headlines that we have not gotten to throughout this week. Obviously, plenty of football to talk about, so this is kind of the way I like it, but plenty of things that we have to update you guys on, and I want to start with the ACC. There is a ton going on over there at the ACC, and a lot of things that, with Florida State and Clemson, it's been a little bit quiet as of recently with all of this different stuff happening behind the scenes and a lot of this stuff heading to mediation and a lot of complicated things happening behind the scenes. It's gone a little bit quiet in terms of big-time headlines. That's no longer the case. There is a little bit of there's a thing going around in the ACC realm of possibly changing the revenue split that they have right now, the structure of how they split that revenue to go in align with how much media deal you bring in. Essentially, your media power, your brand power, you will get paid in accordance to that. And it's something that I have to imagine not a lot of people around the ACC are fans of. Now, there are some teams that would get it very nicely. If you're Miami, if you're UNC, I tend to believe you would be number 1 and 2 in this conference if they were to split it this way. And then maybe Clemson and Florida State number 3 and 4, maybe Duke in there at 3, who knows. But at the end of the day, I do think there are some people that would be more than on board for this. They would absolutely buy into this. I also think there's Wake Forest and Boston College and a number of other teams that would say, why would we give up a little bit of our piece of the pie so these two people that are suing our conference can stay in? It's one of those things that you're going to have a hard time convincing a lot of those presidents and ADs to sign on to this. I tend to believe it's not going to happen. It's one of those things that will obviously change over time, and we'll see what happens with it. But overall, it's one of those things that I can't imagine there are a lot of people in the ACC that are, giddy to go to the table and talk to Florida State and Clemson right now, especially if they're saying, yeah, we're just going to take a little bit of the money that you make every year. There's no way that Wake Forest and Boston College are really into this idea. So I question if it's going to happen. We will absolutely update you on it as it goes on, because would be a huge thing for the ACC going forward, keeping those two guys intact, but maybe frustrating some other people in the room. But it'll be really interesting to watch. I just tend to believe it's a little bit more far-fetched as of right now. And then we had Deion Sanders make a little bit of headline this last weekend when he was talking about reporters, talking about NIL, just saying, here, the quote, I'll just read the quote for you. Once upon a time, you guys never attacked college players. Now they're making money, and some of y'all want to be envious and jealous about that. Here's the thing. College players have always been attacked. Tim Tebow was attacked. Aaron Hernandez was attacked when all of that stuff was going on. Johnny Manziel was attacked when all of that stuff was going on. I fully agree that there are certain reporters out there that do not like the current structure in college football. They don't like that college football players are getting paid. They think it's all transactionary, even though it's not, which is a totally different conversation. There are people out there. I'm not arguing that by any means. The idea that the kids before this were not getting torn to pieces is just not true. Now, there's more ability to do that now because of social media, because of all of this other stuff that plays into college football now, but the idea that kids before the NIL era were just hanging out and not getting bothered by these beat reporters is just not true. And then the other part of this is I'm fully on board with people calling out what reporters are doing incorrectly if they're really doing something incorrectly. I'm more than on board for that, especially around these kids who have a lot on their shoulders and have a lot of people attacking them from a lot of different directions. Protecting your kids, protecting your players is the number one priority, and I totally agree with that. I would love for him to say some names. I would love for him to sit up there and say, you wrote this specific thing about my player that was not true, and then we can have a conversation about it. Right now, it seems like he's just talking at a grandiose stage about media in general, and I don't know who he's mad at. I don't know who he's going after, and I don't know if that person or this group of people actually did anything wrong. So I would love for him to say, you from the Denver Post or you from this specific website said Shedeur was doing this with his NIL money and he's not. And I think then we could have a real conversation. When you just say you guys are going after these players the way you didn't before, I don't really know what to make of that. So it's one of those interesting scenarios where I tend to agree with a lot of what Deion said in that quote and a lot of what his sentiment was in that quote. I just like him to really do it, really say what that reporter said, and we can have a real conversation about why he shouldn't do that and why it's really messed up what was happening over there. So it's one of those things that I don't really have too much of a problem with what he said. I just think the idea that kids before the NIL era were just living free and clear of all these beat reporters is just beyond not true. But Moving forward, John Gruden seems like he might want to get into college football. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but it sounds like the former NFL head coach wants to get back involved in football. He feels like a lot of the stuff that has happened over the past little bit, obviously got fired after some really terrible emails came out around him, and definitely a lot of things that came out around him that were not great by any means. And he resigned in October of 2021, has not returned to football since. So we'll see if he's able to get a job at the college football level. I will say this: I think if he were to get a college football job, it would not go well. I just plainly think that. I think his style of coaching would not work at the college football level. I don't think he has the ability to be able to recruit at a high level. I just think it would be a very, very tough thing for him to do. I think he's a fantastic football mind. I have opinions behind the scenes, that's beside the point. I do think he's one of those guys that would work from a football perspective if he's not the head coach. If you have him as the offensive coordinator and he doesn't have to do too much recruiting and that type of stuff, I think that would make sense. As of right now, I just don't think it would work all that well, and I don't know how many college football programs would be lining up. But at the end of the day, it is a big-time name. It is someone that a lot of people would at least think about, so I have to imagine he'll get some type of job, maybe a low-level job here pretty soon, and we'll see what happens from there, but definitely something to monitor going forward. Something happened in Georgia this past week that we definitely need to talk about. It sounds like Georgia has an executive order to ban the NCAA from enforcing NIL, which essentially just means they can't do anything. Georgia and Georgia Tech and Georgia Southern and Georgia State and all of those teams in that state are allowed to start paying players. They're allowed to kind of open up their pocketbooks and start setting up these really complicated systems that are going to have to be set up by every single program in the country. So they got a little bit of advantage right now. Those two schools right there are going to have the ability to go into rooms with elite recruits and say, we can pay you without any problem going forward over the next little bit. And then you'll have to see what happens with the House settlement, and you'll get into that once that is officially passed. But the reality is, anyone that can get a kickstart on what all of this looks like, get a kickstart on all of this different stuff that is going to come on their plate, it's a win. So these two schools just got a huge boost to their recruiting ability, and not only that, but a huge boost to just figuring out what all of this craziness is going to look like at their two schools, while everyone else is kind of just waiting for that thing to kick in. I tend to believe there are a lot of people around a lot of different states that are having those conversations right about now, but Georgia and Georgia Tech have to be pretty happy about what just happened over there at the Georgia legislature. But let's get into Tennessee, because I have an issue with this little one. Tennessee has added a 10% talent fee to their season tickets going forward starting in 2025, and I got a problem with this. I understand that Tennessee is going to have some of those bills that we just talked about that they're going to have to foot going forward. I totally agree that it's going to be a little bit difficult for some of these athletic departments out there to foot all of these bills. Tennessee is not one of them. I can absolutely promise you that Tennessee is not one of them that is looking at their books right now and saying, we really cannot handle paying these kids. I promise you they are not in that group. There are plenty of people that are in that group, don't get me wrong. Tennessee is just not one of them. And I have hated this for quite a long time, that in college football and in sports in general, really, the buck is always passed to the fans. They understand that we as the fans are willing to pay. We are willing to go into these games because we want to be in Neyland Stadium. We want to be in Sanford Stadium. We want to be in all of these incredible places around the country. We want to be there every weekend, hanging out with our friends, doing tailgating, all of the stuff that makes college football special. So they know that they can pass this off to us, and we'll say, yeah, sure, that makes sense. And I guess if it does go toward getting better players on your team, there's a lot of Tennessee fans that would be more than fine with that. I just think it's one of those things that, why? Why do you have to do this? I know Tennessee does not have to do it. I know a number of teams that are going to do it going forward do not have to do it. So it's one of those things that whenever the fans are capable or able to foot the bill, they absolutely will. I can promise you that, and especially going forward with a number of different things coming on the books, it's going to get a little bit more aggressive. So I have to imagine I'm going to be very frustrated by a number of these different rules going forward, but Tennessee was just the first one to it. So I'm frustrated with them first, but I promise I'll follow suit if others kind of follow suit in this. Apologies. And then we have Pat Narduzzi, because he got fined $5,000 for publicly criticizing the ACC refs. I love this for a million different reasons. I think we need way more coaches talking about what's going on in the ref world, because the reality is it's not going well. There's a number of different things that have to be fixed in terms of what refs are, how they're structured, who they're employed by, a million different things that need to change. you have to have coaches to speak out to say it. You have to have coaches like Kirby Smart, like Pat Narduzzi, like all of these guys that have been in this business for such a long time to say this is not the way it's supposed to be going. The Panthers got 12 penalties, 112 yards, and a come from behind win against West Virginia this past weekend. And there were a lot that were absolutely crazy. I'll be totally honest with you. There were a lot that made absolutely no sense, and one of those that he said after the game, we just beat West Virginia in the backyard brawl, and we beat the officials in one game as well. So it's one of those things that I would love to see more of this. I think we need all of the coaches talking about this in very certain terms, saying we got hosed in this game. We got a little bit, there were a number of calls that went the way that they absolutely should not go, and there are a number of things that need to be fixed about the way we go about officiating going forward. Or you're going to have Pat Narduzzi looking like that quite a few times on Saturday. So going to be an interesting thing. Would love to see a lot of coaches follow suit and then probably get fined in the same way that Pat Narduzzi did. And then we have to talk about the AAC and Air Force. Air Force is one of the teams that the AAC, the American, is going after for their possible expansion going forward. We know that the Pac-12 has taken over a number of teams from the Mountain West, including Colorado State, San Diego State, Fresno State, and Boise State. They're looking for a couple more. It doesn't sound like Air Force is on the short list to get in, so they're looking for somewhere else to go. And it sounds like the American is one of the conferences that would be on the short list. Now, one of the big-time questions here is if the American is looking for a new team to add into it, are they worried about these two teams leaving? Are they worried about Memphis and Tulane possibly walking out the door to the Pac-12? And if they are, then this makes a lot of sense. Definitely go out and get these players in. It does sound like if the Mountain West does lose Air Force, by the way, it will take them below that 8-team threshold to be a conference at the FBS level, and I can't imagine they're getting back over that. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this develop. I think it's one of those things that there's going to be a lot of movement in the realignment world going forward. The American might be the epicenter for it. So we're going to have to watch them very, very closely. Absolutely love that Air Force is going to the same conference of Army and Navy, so very much like that. But I think it's one of those things that there's going to be a lot of movement at the Group of 5 level, and the Americans probably at the very center of it. Maybe it's adding Air Force, but losing these two guys, Memphis and Tulane, right here. And then finally, a really great piece of news that came out last night that I saw is Chris Lewis, the talented wide receiver for Troy, has officially finished his cancer treatment and he is cancer-free. He was diagnosed with osteosarcoma earlier this fall and has been out since, obviously, dealing with this treatment, and could not be more happy for this kid. Obviously, it was a very scary last little bit for him and his family dealing with all of this different stuff, and osteosarcoma is quite the disease, I won't lie to you. So it's definitely something that they're very happy to be past this part of it, be on the road to recovery a little bit more. Obviously, quite a ways to go, no two ways about that, but obviously love to see this kid back on the right side of things, hopefully working his way back onto the field. Likely will not see him until 2025, I would have to imagine at the very earliest. But obviously, the best news of all is that he's healthy. That's the ultimate news here, and cannot wait to see this guy get it back on the field and do what he loves, which is playing football. So very happy for this kid and cannot wait to see what he can do once he gets back on that field. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have really awesome people doing great work across every single sport you could want. So anything you need in the world of sports, come on over to GSMC, and we will have you totally covered. Enjoy the games this weekend. It's going to be absolutely incredible to watch all of this stuff go down. I think we might have a couple of big-time upsets this upcoming weekend, so just keep your eyes peeled. Definitely make sure you're watching all the games, and we'll be back here same time on Monday to break down all of the craziness. So I will see you then. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great weekend, you guys.